In the previous tutorial, we talked about contrast, and there is one thing I would like to mention. By creating these variations of width in the stroke, we basically emulate in a digital environment tools that are used in an analog environment, where we would achieve these feats by, for example, using a calligraphy pen instead of a ball pen. In type design, this is what we know as modulation. Next, what I want to talk about is, well, some people call it angle of contrast, angle of stress, axis, or simply angle, but I'm going to call it stress. And what it is the angle of compression that is relative to an axis. This is created by the difference between thin and thick strokes. If we look at the first glyph, it has no stress. But if we look at the second one, we will notice that it looks as if it's squeezed from the sides, sort of like a hand silicone gripping ring, if you ever played with one of those. This is because the vertical strokes are wider, creating that inward pressure. So in the case of this glyph, we have vertical stress. Now let's open the compound path of the second glyph. And to change the angle of stress, what we have to do is to rotate the counter, in our case the ellipse in the middle. To do that, select the ellipse, move the mouse to the edge until you see the rotation tool. Then just click and drag to rotate the object. To rotate the object in increments of 45 degrees, just hold down the Shift key. First, rotate the ellipse to 90 degrees. By doing this, we now have horizontal stress, which is not very common when you look at typefaces, but in my opinion, it does add a bit of a futuristic look to the typeface. I just think it's hard to master and to keep consistent across the rest of the glyphs. To others, it might just look awkward or goofy. Some people think that horizontal stress helps with legibility by leading the eyes of the reader. Let's rotate the glyph back to 45 degrees. This way we have diagonal stress. This is a more common type of stress than horizontal and seems to become more and more popular, although you will notice that this type of stress is not kept throughout the whole typeface. Most of the times it will be just the letter O. This adds a bit of quirkiness or playfulness to the typeface. Also, if we rotate the ellipse to 315 degrees, this will flip the stress angle, but it will still be called diagonal stress. Diagonal stress is considered to be dynamic because it gives the typeface motion, while vertical is more static, looking more stable by comparison. What we are doing with stress is to replicate the angle of a tool used in analog, as you would for example do in calligraphy, where you would hold a pen that has a tip with a wide edge and a narrow edge at a certain angle to create a thin or a thick stroke. Or in the case of a brush or a nib, you would replicate the angle at which you apply pressure to the tool to change the width of the stroke. Stress in a typeface is consistent across the glyphs, most of the times, but you can also choose to have variable stress by having different angles of stress on certain glyphs. If you want to rotate the counter to a specific angle, you can do that by selecting the ellipse, then go into the toolbar and clicking on the rotate tool, press enter and simply type in how many degrees you want the object to rotate. Then press OK.